I mean, we got into it really early when it was still in kind of wasn't going to be available as a market, and people were starting to look at it and projects were starting to get planned out.
So we did lighting controls for Sabbath-observant Jewish people, and our business boomed.
Here we have an alarm monitoring center that's literally putting out fires. Really before, in some cases, before they really flame up.
That's all he does now, is he literally helps seniors understand the equipment in their homes, their phones, their smart TVs.
And we've just been going property to property to property. And then our name got spread around at the Pennsylvania Apartment Association, which we just joined. I think somebody from the first property management company recommended us to another one. And within 6 months, we've done 5 of their properties.
All right, well, welcome to Coffee Break with Jake. We have this call every Friday, most Fridays. Last Friday was the 4th, but most Fridays at 11 a.m. And the purpose of the call is to bring together folks much smarter than me to talk about challenges, opportunities, best practices, because I've found that the most important things I know I've learned from other people. And so I selfishly host this call every week to learn from you. Thank you for being on here. We are talking about the niches in riches. And now I know there's some questions about whether it's niche or niche, but nobody says the riches and niches. So we're going to stick with the riches and niches for the purposes of the call today. Really excited to have some awesome folks on here that know all about niches. And I'm gonna call on one to get started here in just a few. But if you'll raise your hand for me, if your business has positioned itself, you position the business as a specialist in one particular vertical market, or providing one particular type of solution that once you started offering it and once the word started getting spread around that you could do this thing, that you started to find people coming out of the woodwork to call on your business for that very same solution. If any of you are really heavily focused on one particular vertical market, would you raise your hand for me? All right. Well, I'm gonna start calling anyways, because I know enough about some of you to ask questions. John Tanner is on the call. John's with American. John, I happen to know a little bit about some of the work that you guys are doing in the cannabis space, because I just had a conversation with David Oles earlier this week to learn a little bit about it. And I'm excited to have David join me in Boston next month to talk about that particular vertical market. So I think you guys have been in that for about 10 years now, right?
Yeah, not quite 10, but pretty close. I mean, we got into it really early when it was still in kind of wasn't going to be available as a market, and people were starting to look at it and projects were starting to get planned out in kind of anticipation to it. So it's been a pretty significant journey for us. And at this point, I think we have over 175 physical site/customers specifically in that vertical.
Yeah. So when we talk about that vertical market, I imagine that when American Alarm and Communications got into business, and how many years has it been now?
Oh, geez, 1972, I think, is when we got into business. So a couple of days.
Couple of days, yeah. So in 1972, I would bet that there was no plans to become the specialist on securing cannabis facilities. Is that a fair assessment?
I think that's a pretty accurate. Yeah. In fact,
Yeah.
I would almost assure you that was the position at the time.
Yeah, and so, 175-ish locations in a relatively, I mean, it's not a huge, I don't think of New England. When I think of New England, I don't think of New England as like, man,
That's
like,
just Massachusetts, primarily Mass. It's not really readily adopted into the other surrounding states yet. So it's starting to blossom. That's just in Massachusetts, not even New England.
so we talk about Massachusetts, and Massachusetts is a relatively small state, approximately 7 million residents.
Yeah, about 7.8 million. the vast majority of them live east of Worcester.
Yeah. And so we look at that. We look at, okay, how many total cannabis facilities could there possibly be? Do you know how many? I'm curious. I mean, just wondering. Yeah.
I don't know the exact number. It's based on licenses, so it's very heavily regulated, and I think at the end of the day, that's one of the reasons why we went at it so aggressively as a vertical. Although it was the Wild West in the sense that nobody had any experience in it, there was very, very heavy regulation from part of the state government called the CCC, Cannabis Control Commission. And so I think that's where we were able to kind of look at it and say, it makes sense. We have the expertise, we have the support, we have the design, we have all the tools necessary to be, for lack of better words, a SME in that particular vertical. It was something we went after very aggressively.
Yeah. And so leading up to the call and kind of, telling everybody what we're going to be talking about and talking about the riches and niches, taking complex problems, solving for them, and then providing repeatable solutions. And talking to David is a salesperson there at American and really specializes in this space. And he was explaining to me that a lot of the operators that are getting into the business, sometimes they don't know everything that they're going to be faced with. Sometimes they do know what they're going to be faced with. And in either case, they realize very quickly that they're going to need a subject matter expert to kind of guide them through that. And so could you talk to me about, how from a planning perspective, again, I want to back up and say, my goal here is not to say that all of you should be in the cannabis business, in securing cannabis facilities. My goal here is to understand just how complex providing solutions into this particular vertical market are and how the folks at American have positioned themselves as subject matter experts and developed a reputation there within the Massachusetts market. So, John, can you speak to how your team serves as a guide in that space?
I think probably one of the biggest changes for us as a company is recognizing that, especially early on, often as businesses, we quote projects and then we wait and it comes in. But, those are for companies that can get the required permits to open their building, right? In a lot of cases, we were designing projects that for businesses that didn't even have the license necessary to do the work, and there was no guarantee that they were going to get it. It was a bit of a lottery. So we had to change to almost kind of carve out a whole design, like an engineering group that just said, hey, we're going to put this together for you. It's going to cost you this much money, and you can take that and do whatever you want with it. But, we can't quote you a project that may not come to fruition and invest that kind of time and energy and, expertise without getting some kind of compensation up front. So that was really the first big piece for us, is we became basically, a kind of very focused engineering group.
This is something that I talk to my team about a lot of times as it relates to some of the cool things that we do with branding. I always try to emphasize that we can do really cool things and we can do really custom things and we can do things that are complex, but we have to make sure that if we're going to put the time into doing that thing, that we've vetted to some degree, hey, what's the business case for this, right? Because otherwise you could find yourself attacking really complex things, problems, trying to solve for them. But if it doesn't ultimately lead to a sale, it's not really worth the effort, right? Those resources and those efforts could be, steered someplace else. And one of the things I talked to David about was vetting the customer, right? Getting an understanding of, hey, what is the likelihood that this is going to actually work? And in some cases, walking away when it wasn't a right fit. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Well, I think I may have mentioned this before. I mean, the interesting thing is that you have obviously a very niche business, okay? And a lot of the folks that are involved in the business are not business professionals, right? They don't have current companies, but they have a particular skill set. They understand, for lack of better words, the genetics around growing cannabis and what works and what doesn't work and how you can cultivate it, but they don't have the business acumen to be successful. And so oftentimes they'll approach us and say, "Hey, we need you to come do this." And our first questions to them, really, when we start the investigation, is, show us your budget, not just your budget for security, but your budget for the whole plan.
Yeah.
What is it? Because what we found is they just don't have enough money segmented to even other aspects of the development that we just can look at it and say, you're going to run out of money. You don't have enough money set aside to take a 125-year-old mill building and bring it to current, building code. And so we look at it and say, you're woefully undercapitalized in these areas. You can't scale at this level. If this is all the capital you have to kind of come back to this level. Having that conversation has allowed us to help those growers and the cultivators and the distributors get to opening their doors. Because for us, at the end of the day, that's a big piece of this. Is there's a lot of RMR involved, especially in our state where it's highly regulated, inspections are required. And so we're really going after that RMR.
And then post sale, I know that from what I understand, you actually train the customers on how to perform monthly inspections, and then you're out there, your team is out there to perform annual inspections, third-party inspections. Is that right?
Correct. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, I had a dealer in Tucson, Arizona years ago that he told me, he said, Jake, I flip hamburgers. I do the same thing over and over and over again. And he made a modest living doing it. For him, I think it was a low stress, a low complexity thing. It was repeatable, and he built a respectable business around it. When we talk about the riches and niches, though, I'm not talking about the folks that are kind of going out and slamming 3-door and a window alarm systems, right? Like, hey, this is an easy, repeatable solution. There's some money in that. Don't get me wrong. And there's a lot of folks that have made a lot of money in it. But when we talk about solving complex issues with repeatable solutions, I think that's the differentiator, right? Like it's not just about providing simple, repeatable solutions. There's a business model in that, and at scale, you can make money doing that. But really becoming that subject matter expert on these complex issues, systemizing the implementation of solutions for it, and then being able to do that over and over again to the point that you are respected in your market as a subject matter expert, as somebody that can deliver on the solution. That's how you get to 175-ish locations in a state with a population under 8 million. Again, if you told me 175 locations in the state of California, I would be like, okay, cool, that's respectable. 175 locations in Massachusetts is wild. I mean, I think that's just a testament to the reputation that you guys have built in that vertical market. Now, I don't want to spend the whole call on cannabis. I think there's probably enough interest. We did a webinar a couple years ago. We called it High Security, securing cannabis facilities. And actually, another member of John's team was on for that. And we had a lot of folks that were interested. Maybe we'll tee that up for another call. But I know there's some folks that are on here that have found riches in another niche with custom high-end integration. If your firm offers really custom high-end integration of security, smart home, AV, would you raise your hand for me? Or I'm going to start calling on you because I know a little bit about some of your businesses. All right, we got Pat on here. Pat, you're doing some high-end residential or commercial?
We were blessed with, I bought a home in the middle of an Orthodox Jewish neighborhood. I'm an Italian guy from Brooklyn, had the best Christmas lights on the block, and raised my family there for 30 years. And we essentially got we would integrate our security systems with our control for automation system. So we did lighting controls for Sabbath observant Jewish people, and our business boomed. And we would be able to.
Just for a second, guys, I have had this come up a number of times. For those of you that may not be familiar with this, if you are an Orthodox Jew, you will not, there are some very specific, laws around the Sabbath that, as an example, you don't flip light switches. If you live in an apartment building, the elevator stops on every floor because you wouldn't just pushing the button would be, I don't know what the term is, but it's a no-no. And so this is something that really I have had some systems integrators that specialize this, and this is a pretty cool niche. And so I just wanted to preface this just so everybody understood that the necessity of providing these types of solutions into that particular community. So sorry about that. Go ahead and continue on with that. So you started doing some of that and explain kind of how you did that and how you got into it.
Yeah. So yeah, I should, just for everyone's edification, Orthodox Jews are firm believers in their Sabbath, which is a time to rest, right? Well, the rest of us utilize our weekends to run around like crazy people with baseball and everything else. They use it as family time. And what the intent of the law is, or the tradition is, that you would make your fire before the Sabbath. So on the Sabbath, you wouldn't do any work. And in current times, turning a light switch on is equivalent to making a fire, right? So that's how they translated it. So we essentially automate their houses and their lighting systems to turn lights on and off during their Sabbath as well as their holidays. So the house has like a holiday mode that lights come on and off throughout that whole holiday period. And a holiday could extend to 3 or 4 days sometimes. And we were very fortunate and blessed to be working in a community that's a very close-knit community. We did very little advertising. People knew people and everyone recommended you. And like anything else, you're working under the microscope of a community. God forbid of something going wrong or somebody saying something wrong. So it was a very stressful. You had to satisfy a lot of people and really be on top of your game. And we all know in this industry that means service. So the moment somebody needs you, you're available 24/7. And living within that community, people selected us because they could literally knock on my door on a Saturday. They had a problem. They had a water leaking into a smoke detector. My kids, learned how to set people's ovens for what we call Sabbath mode. But we were blessed. I raised 4 kids, paid for all their colleges, and continued to service many, those accounts. I don't need a lot in my life to keep my family secure. So we're quite happy where we're at with our small little mom and pop business, literally.
That's amazing. And I look at that and I say, so taking from based on what you were saying, you said you had the best Christmas lights in Brooklyn. And on the blockchain that you had to learn about this, right? Like this is not something that you totally knew all about. And so could you explain to us as you were trying to understand this, what did you do to become a subject matter expert on this?
So I started as a teenager in this business. I was fortunate enough to find my passion, watching a green LED light turn on and off when somebody opened the door excited me back then. I was into magic as a kid, so I guess I thought it was magic. And I met someone my age when I was about 16 or 17 that was actually in the business himself, and he was an Orthodox Jewish person, somebody that we would bounce questions back and forth about traditions and customs. And he's still in business himself today. His name is Shimon Gross. He's crosstown security in the 5 towns of New York. And as I happened to find myself living in an Orthodox neighborhood, which was kind of by fluke. The neighborhood kind of grew around me. I would always ask him questions. And I also had neighbors who were what they call Baal Tshuva. It was a Jewish person who became more religious as life went on. And as he was learning, he was teaching me. And I always found, an interest in other people's religions and customs. And it made me a better man. It made me a better Christian. It made me a better I maybe had 4 kids. We grew up when you're in a neighborhood where everybody has 4 to 8 children, the theory of just stopping at 2 is, like, oh, that's nothing. A couple of more kids, that's it. And it gave me a really affection for, large families. So I, have 4 kids and I'm hoping for a lot of grandchildren one day. One thing they do differently than I did, I spent my 20s, partying in the Hamptons of Long Island, not settling down till I was close to, let's say, 28. A lot of people in the Orthodox world get married at 20, 21, 22. So their parents or grandparents by the age of 40 or 50, which is amazing. So, I'm gonna be 60 soon and we don't have grandkids yet, but thinking about getting on the floor with a grandchild at the ripe old age of 65 or something is gonna be painful. But it was great to be accepted in a community where I really had a lot of different traditions and customs, and we were blessed. And you gotta give God a lot of credit because He's got a plan for us. He gave me a good plan, so we're good. And I sold my house for 10 times what I paid for it, and I'm living in the Poconos now with 2 dogs and my wife, and I run my New Jersey business from here.
That's terrific. That's terrific. And I look at this and I say, gosh, if that isn't a perfect example of a niche, right? I mean, just a really, really niche thing, right? There's not ADT is not known as a specialist for that. I could guarantee you that most other alarm companies in the area, they may be able to do it, they may know how to do it, but you built a reputation for yourself as a specialist, as a subject matter expert, and not only did it contribute to your success financially, but it sounds like personally as well. So really cool. Thank you for sharing that, Pat. Very cool. All right, so do we have anybody on the call that specializes in another really particular vertical market? It could be something like schools. It could be something like government facilities. It could be something like, oh, I don't know, maybe some unique video monitoring applications. I'd love to talk about some of that if we've got anybody on the call that's doing any of those things. Sarah. I'm calling on Sarah Salazar. Sarah, yes. I'll let you know about this thing, but I'd love to learn more about it. I was at an event with you all at some point or another, and somebody was talking about operators putting out fires with hoses remotely. Are you familiar with that?
So we monitor a product. It's a proprietary system for one of our customers. And the system it's called Fire Rover. And what it essentially does is it's a creation that they did themselves with their own engineers, their own group, and it's really, really cool. They put thermal cameras together, so it's part of our video monitoring platform. And the thermal cameras are integrated with a fire suppression system and a remote controlled fire suppression for here at the central station. So, in other words, we're monitoring very, very large recycling facilities, battery storage plants, fertilizer plants, trash places, trash dumps, and all those things have a risk of being very, 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 very flammable. And there's people working on these plants. It's not remote controlled by, remote workers. They're on site. So there's a particular danger to life safety with these customers. And so the traditional alarm or fire alarm system where the fire alarm goes off, we call the fire department, they may or may not get out there, we notify somebody, did not work in this situation because it's so quick and so highly flammable. So we monitor these systems that will pick up extreme temperatures in very small areas. So, there'll be a flare up and it's under garbage. So if you're there looking at it, you won't even see because there's no smoke and there's no flame. It's smoldering under a trash pile. But the thermal cameras will pick it up, 500 degrees, all of a sudden it'll spike. We get a notification, we let the site know, and then if it erupts, we will put it out remotely with our operators. So on these cameras, you can see the spike, and the thermal cameras are also good because when we start spraying those little hot spots, it smokes out the camera, so you can't see anything. So those thermal cameras keep us focused. They let us know exactly where the hot spots are. And then while we're putting out the fire, another team member is sending the fire department out and notifying the people on site. And then you'll see them on camera helping they'll bury it with bulldozers or backhoes. But it really does apply to a very specific customer. You wouldn't believe what kind of heat emanates from garbage. I mean, and tire plate facilities where they're storing tires, those things burn for months and months and months if you let it. And so this really does protect the site. It's asset protection, but it's also people protection because it just happens so fast. And our alarm watch team are the ones that are the remote firefighters. and they work really, really well with our customer. Our customer supports us almost as much as we do them, because they'll give, awards to somebody who saved a place, saved somebody's life, or acted quickly or went above and beyond. And, they'll send our team some pretty cool stuff. But we'll post those videos. Our team is really good at posting them maybe once a month, like the monthly recap. And those videos are so, so cool. You can see the nozzle and how they start spraying. You can see, captures and saves, and it's just really, really neat. But it's a very specific, kind of thing, and it has exploded. It met a need where I haven't seen anything like that anywhere else.
Yeah, that's so cool. And again, I didn't plan this call until yesterday afternoon. So I'm really glad that we've had some folks with some very niche things pop up on here. It's just a testament to, I mean, look, we've got a group of 30 some folks on this call, and we're talking about a company that's been in business since the 1970s. That would have never, I mean, a traditional company that would have never imagined early on being the subject matter experts in securing cannabis facilities in Massachusetts. We have a gentleman on here who had the best Christmas lights on the block, but is also an expert on the customs of the Orthodox Jewish community and has found a niche in that and an incredible business in that. And we've got Sarah on talking about this incredible niche business of putting out fires and dumps. I actually happen to know a lot about these dumps now because I was on an airplane recently with somebody from the guy next to me was from West Virginia. And as you guys can imagine, I can pretty much make friends with people, wherever. And I'm chatting with this guy on our flight, and he's in the business of building these dumps, for lack of a better word. Like, they're the folks that come in and build it and put in I don't know, the special substrates and the walls and all kinds of things. And we were talking about, the potential for these things to flare up, and a lot of, it's dangerous. And so how cool is it to think, we think of alarm monitoring centers as the folks that are, calling you when you have a false alarm, right? Like, your alarm system goes off. I walked in with the groceries and forgot to disarm the system, whatever the case might be. But how cool is it that, here we have an alarm monitoring center that's literally putting out fires, really before, in some cases, before they really flame up, right, Sarah? Like, you're seeing the hot spot and then doing it, yeah?
Yes, and that's almost the key, is getting to it before it's completely destructive. And it's expensive for the customer, but it's not nearly as expensive as losing everything.
And see, again, this goes back to my point about, my buddy in Tucson that flipped hamburgers, and he did a good job, and he built a good business. Real character, that guy. But he flipped hamburgers, and he flipped a lot of hamburgers, and he made some money on it. But Sarah talks about this really unique solution, the service that they provide, that is expensive, but it's because the alternative is incredibly expensive, not just in terms of dollars, but even the potential for loss of human life. I mean, it's an incredibly costly alternative. The problem is, as compared to the solution, right? So anytime you can find these really complex issues that you can solve with technology, again, Sarah talks about, hey, this is not just, they can't just put any camera out there and do this, because as she mentioned, where there's smoke, there's fire, and where there's smoke, you can't see. And so, they have to have the right technology to support this. And this goes back to my point with Pat about learning about the problem in depth before providing the solution, because you could very easily go into a situation where there's a potential very big, very costly problem. But if you haven't done your research, if you haven't prepared appropriately, if you don't have the right technology, the right systems, the right processes in place, rather than finding riches and niches, I guess you might end up with stitches and niches. Who do we have on here making stitches references? We got all the rhymes going, but it could be a problem, right? And you're not a subject matter expert then. You failed, right? And that reputation can spread as well. And so, I would just caution the Oh, go ahead, Sarah.
I'll also just throw in there that this particular integrator really paid attention to what their actual cost was, their creation cost, all of the expenses surrounding physical cost. I mean, they developed their own suppression system. They developed their own solution, like dry and wet suppression. It's expensive, not because nobody else is doing it. I mean, that's part of it, right? Nobody else is doing it. We're the only ones. But they were accurately able to really understand their profit margin and what goes into their cost. And that is so key because you're not just charging more because you can, you're really charging more because you need to.
Yeah.
There's a lot that goes into it.
I think that's a really important call out on it, Sarah. I think that a lot of folks that are in the alarm business are technicians by nature. They're folks that really like to come up with really creative solutions for problems. Some of them I would consider to be almost hobbyists, right? Like they like tinkering with it, they like solving for it. And on a small scale, you can do that and you can enjoy that and have fun with it, and whether you make a lot of money on it or not, no big deal. But when we talk about scale, when we talk about providing solutions like Sarah's talking about, it's not enough to just kind of maybe figure out the solution. You need to make sure you have the bean counters involved in this as well, so that, hey, we have a solution, but we also know how to price it, right? I can't tell you how many times I talk to a systems integrator that is spending hours of time trying to figure out how to solve for a problem, time that's because they don't want to charge the customer for this expensive solution, right? They know the best solution is this one solution that'll cost the customer more, but they're wanting to spend lots and lots of time trying to figure out some alternative, less expensive solution, but it's not billable time, right? And so again, just as we talk about these niches and these really creative solutions, Sarah, really good point on that. You can be the best at doing it, but you got to make money doing it too. Otherwise, it's not sustainable. So really, really good call out on that. Hey guys, do we have anybody on here that is working in particular with daycares?
They're typically bad pay.
Bad pay, yeah. Or Mary, talk to me about daycares, and also if there's anybody that's doing schools, if you can raise your hand for me, because I think there's a lot of similarities in what we're protecting kids. A lot of times the budget is not really there for what's needed. But Mary, talk to me a little bit about how you guys got into providing security for daycares.
Well, sorry, I probably raised my hand too soon. What I wanted to mention was that I know of a dealer here in Texas that has focus, laser focus on the senior community, which is kind of similar.
Yeah, daycare for seniors, or is it
And
assisted
well,
living facilities or
no,
senior daycare facilities?
it is just supporting seniors, helping them learn technology.
Huh.
Literally. So I talked to him the other day and he spent 3 hours with a lady that bought a new car. The car dealership did not spend any time explaining it to her, all the new bells and whistles on it. And he went out there, they went through YouTube. He showed her how to work every knob on her car.
Wow.
This guy started out doing like a home office creation. He kind of started out doing that
Yeah.
and went into security, and he started going out to churches and just talking to seniors there about technology. And he has turned, I mean, that's all he does now is
Wow.
he literally helps seniors understand the equipment in their homes, their phones, their smart TVs, their security. He has really have a laser focus on that. I've threatened to send him to my mom's house because
Yeah.
every time I go to my mom's house, he's like, "Sis, can you help me with this?" And I'm like, "No, no, I don't know if I want to delve into this or not." But that is very niche,
What?
and and it's a growing population, so there's definitely a need for it.
Yeah, we've seen a lot of folks in particular specializing in providing systems for assisted living facilities. We have a lot of folks that are obviously selling medical alert systems. That's a really cool one, just kind of being a technologist, I guess, for some of these folks that may need support. But I think there's something really important that you mentioned as you were talking about how he got started. He went and he was speaking at churches and community events about what he offers. And I would encourage those that are on the call and identifying some specific niches that you really excel at, positioning yourself as a subject matter expert is a critical part of keeping your sales pipeline full. And so I know, John's team, as an example, attends the cannabis conferences and they're very plugged into that community. And we have Pat that talks about, being very plugged into the Orthodox Jewish community there. And Sarah, I know you guys are, always positioning yourselves on the video side of things. And so I imagine that somebody probably came to you one day and said, "Hey, I know you do video, but could you fight fires too?" And you said, "Heck yeah." Right. And we've got Mary's guy here who originally realized, hey, after probably during COVID, work from home, business was booming, setting up home offices, making sure that people could do their Zooms from wherever they were in the world, right? And then afterwards realized, hey, like maybe I need to pivot a little bit. Maybe I need to focus on this one particular niche. And so what did he do? He went out and he started telling folks about what he could offer. And now he's teaching people how to use their car, right? I mean, nobody would really think about that. But now that I do think about it, Mary, I think, wow, that's a pretty cool thing to get into. If we have anybody on the call here that their sales team has attended a vertical market conference within the past year, if a conference focused on one particular vertical market, whether this is schools, whether this is cannabis, whether this is multifamily, is there anybody that is either attending these conferences or plugged into any of these associations? Anthony, are you able to unmute yourself?
Hey, Jake.
Hey, I know that you do some multifamily.
Yes.
Because I sold you some stuff for multifamily projects. So you can't hide from me on this, Colin. I know what you guys buy. So I have some insights into what some of your specialties are. Can you talk to us about how you got into some of those multifamily opportunities?
We got in with a few different property management companies that have, some of them are smaller apartment complexes, but some of them are pretty large. And we started with just one local one. I met someone out at a networking event. It was like a happy hour. It wasn't even a formal networking event. And he just did maintenance for one of the smaller apartment complexes near us. I think it's like, I'm going to say 45 to 60 units at this property. And I gave him a card and saw him a couple times. And then one day he reached out to me and he said, one of our properties, we have a gym and kind of like a little community space that has a card access system. And it was just antiquated, one of those situations where they had a computer in a closet that hadn't been booted up in like 8 years and they never knew how to add fobs or cards. So we went in there with alarm.com, updated them. And then it might've been 8 months, a year later, the manager at that property managed another slightly larger property, maybe 100 plus units. Same thing. They wanted access control there on a few doors. Then they wanted cameras. Then it just kind of snowballed and we went from property to property. And at this point, across one of their projects, we did 37 doors of access and a lot of them were on individual buildings that didn't have internet access. So Jake helped me out. I was able to get set up with, I guess, an IoT data reseller, I guess you would call them. But, we purchase the SIM cards, mark them up and sell that data to the client. And we have, I think, 32 radios on that property. So at this point, we're making RMR on 37 doors, 32 cellular radios. Then they wanted to add cameras. So the same thing, alarm.com. We did, I want to say 32 cameras with wireless bridges between the buildings. I mean, a really complex job, not massive, but for us, it was a huge job. And we've just been going property to property to property. And then our name got spread around at the Pennsylvania Apartment Association, which we just joined. I think somebody from the first property management company recommended us to another one. And within 6 months, We've done 5 of their properties, smaller projects like, well, the largest one has 32 cameras on it, all alarm.com. So we get that RMR. One of their properties only has 8 or 9 cameras, but they just keep feeding them to us. It was networking. It wasn't necessarily because we had joined the association, but I think, we're just going to keep plugging away at it.
Yeah, I think this is a really good example of being open to new connections. Number one, I think that a lot of times as people, as business owners, as professionals, we get very stuck in. We work with the folks that we work with. We have our families, we have our friends, and honestly, I don't know that I have a hard enough time keeping up with my friends as it is. I don't know if I need any new friends. Just because I feel like I might neglect them a little bit. But I also recognize that it's important to get out there and meet people all the time because you never know what the next connection could bring, right? You go to this networking event, as Anthony talks about. He has conversation with this gentleman that's handling maintenance at the properties and gives him his card, and look what it's snowballed into. Now, it would have gone nowhere had Anthony, they called him and he said, we're not really the guys for that, right? Or if he installed it and it didn't really work, right? Then it wouldn't have progressed to the next job and the next job after that. But when you have somebody like Anthony that number one is a professional and capable of providing solutions, right? That's number one. Number two, he's open to new connections, right? He's willing to go out there and meet people. He's got business cards on him to hand out when he's at one of these events. And then when he goes out and does the job, he does it right, make sure that it works. I know that there was some research that went into providing the solutions for that project because I had the opportunity to do some research with Anthony on finding a solution for this project. And this is one that's for the project with the connectivity, the cellular connectivity as an example. I think if you look for these problems, or if you identify, hey, this is a cool thing that we were able to do for a customer, and then you put yourself in the position to meet more customers like that, that's setting you up for success. Again, to keep that sales pipeline full is so important, and the networking piece of it is so important. I would like to point out providing connectivity in multifamily, remote locations, even in I would bet that if I polled the group here and asked them how often they liked working with the IT guy, their client's IT guy, most folks would say, I don't like working with my client's IT guy most of the time. Most of the time, it's a challenge. But I can't tell you how many of our partners have found by offering connectivity, dedicated connectivity that's not on the LAN, that the IT guy has a control over and a death grip on, and is honestly sometimes seems like he's hoping that you fail. When you're able to provide your own connectivity into that, you can find again, hey, here's a repeatable solution. It's simple. It's easier for me to do over and over and again than to deal with, every single different IT guy. It does cost them a little bit more, right? Because we're not piggybacking on their internet connection, but it really does change the game. So I want to point out again, opportunity with Anthony in multifamily by networking, by providing solutions. Aside from multifamily, I think that the connectivity piece that he sold into that one project that he mentioned is probably an opportunity that a lot of our folks are sleeping on. I think that the alarm industry, we sell the connection. We're selling the connection to, in the case of alarm monitoring, you're selling the connection to a room full of people staffed 24/7, just waiting in case something happens. They're keeping an eye on it and they're going to call. And I think too often we think we're selling just like alarm monitoring, and we don't understand, or we oversimplify it to a point where it takes away the value. But I think the most value in what we provide is in connectivity, whether it's connection between that alarm system and the central station, or connection between their thermostat and their mobile phone, or connection between the camera, the doorbell camera at their house and the notifications on their phone. All of this is really about selling the connectivity. And so again, Anthony, I want to call out that piece of what you were talking about with the project, because I think it's so important to think about how we can sell that connectivity and the value that connectivity provides. Pat, did you want to add something in?
I know you've been out of the installation business for a while as a distributor, but your dad was there. I think what you're saying there is
And most days, by the end of the day, I'm thinking, man, why didn't I go work with Dad?
I think what you're saying is really the crux of where we are in this industry right now. The things that people could do themselves are what we used to do. These Ring cameras they could put at their front doors are replacing alarm systems. Ring alarm systems are getting very simple to do. I only succeeded in what I was doing because my clientele really didn't have the skills to even be a do-it-yourselfer. Right? The Orthodox people were at that level. They didn't even own a screwdriver. I was doing a late night service call in someone's house, and I said, "You have a screwdriver." Half the time, they were breaking out a toolbox their in-laws gave them that was never used. So I'm afraid for the future of a portion of this industry, because where I always did the parents, then maybe the grandparents, the parents, and the next generation. Quite honestly, the next generation stopped calling. And I would say, "Oh, your daughter moved into this town. Who's doing her alarm?" "Oh, they did it themselves. They put a Ring camera up or something." So things have changed a lot. We used to do $10,000 plus alarm systems, shock sensors on each window on a separate zone, 100 zones of protection, wiring Excel spreadsheets that went for 5 pages with interconnects and splices. That doesn't exist anymore. I really don't know where the industry is going to go, other than the high-end market requiring monitored fire alarms to satisfy insurance company concerns. And that's the only reason why we're still in that business.
Well, and at the end of the call, we'll end it with doom and gloom like that. So
I think it may be reality in case it just changed.
my perspective is this: I think we are an industry well positioned to connect things to people that can add value along the way. And so, when we look at it, it may not be the same in that we're monitoring just door switches on doors, but as we get more and more devices out there in the field, whether it's residential or commercial or industrial, maybe it's not enough for us to be simply calling when your front door opens and your alarm system goes off. It is enough for millions of people. We should note that for millions and millions of people throughout the country, alarm monitoring as it is today is seen as valuable, and they have that service. So, I want to, before I go on, I want to say, hey, millions of folks would say that there is value in traditional alarm monitoring. But I would also say, how cool and exciting is it that we're in an industry with scaled, really high-tech, incredible monitoring facilities that are able to do so much more than just act as a call center today, even to the point that they're putting out fires. I mean, in a world where there's autonomous vehicles, how far out are we from Sarah putting out a fire at your house with an autonomous fire truck? I don't know. Probably next week, right? But I just think I think things change, but I think that we are very well positioned to operate within a changing market, to identify opportunities where we can add value and solve for complex issues. And I think particularly in some of these niches where we haven't thought about how we can add value, that there's value to be provided there and money to be made. Anthony, did you want to add something?
Yeah, I wanted to kind of expand on what you said just a little while ago, that we're selling access, selling these data plans, connections. This was so, just in full transparency, we found a low data usage plan. We pay $5 a month. We charge them 20 times 32 doors. It sounds like we're hammering them, but they were thrilled because Comcast wanted $89 per building. So I just wanted to add that, it's a slam dunk for both of, them, us.
That's such a good point, Anthony. Sometimes we put the limits on what we think people are willing to pay. And when we really take enough time to understand the alternatives, whether the alternative is an alternative service or the alternative is going without the service that you're providing, when you understand the true cost of that, and then you can start to understand the value of the service that you're providing. And there's financial cost, right? There's how much does this thing cost you? And then the mental cost of how much does it cost you mentally to even be worrying about this thing, right? Like we can solve for the financial piece of this. We can solve for you even worrying about it to begin with. There's a real value in that. Okay, well, guys, I try to keep this call to an hour every week. I want to thank all of you for jumping on. We have this call every Friday at 11 a.m. I'm hoping to see you all next Friday at 11 a.m. For those of you that do business with us today, I want to thank you for the opportunity to support your business. It really is an honor to print your logo on the products that you prefer. I believe that all of you that have developed incredible reputations over the years, the decades, that you deserve to have your logo printed front and center on the product so your customers can see it. Thank you for doing business with us. If you don't do business with us today, I encourage you to reach out. I'd love the opportunity to support you. But whether you do business with us or not, you're always welcome on this call. So I'm really glad to have you on here. I encourage you to find the riches and the niches that you can be a subject matter expert in. And I hope you all have a great weekend. Thanks so much.